The global supply chains are about business, commerce, and about procurement within the business environment. So that effectively you're trying to secure those things that you need for your goods and your goods manufacturing or inputs into your goods through a global network. Your interest is in minimizing the cost, minimizing the waste, and getting good quality, and using the whole global marketplace as the area through which you do your searches for those best products that you wish to use for your business inputs. I think that the only other point that I could add to it is that you're trying to do this while maximizing the profits to your company. So that in a real sense, you search the world for the best inputs to your business and get them to your country, minimizing the costs so as to enable you to maximize your profits. We came out of the COVID pandemic recognizing that the small islands of the world, and obviously Barbados is one, we always knew they were very vulnerable. But I think that what struck us most was the extent to which our islands, being tourism and travel dependent, can virtually shut down if you lose markets that would normally bring tourists here. And then you have to rely on the rest of the world for your day-to-day survival. The reality is that, without exception, all of the small states of the world experienced challenges to their wider economy outside of travel and hospitality services because of the fact that there was this shutdown. And your procurement lines suffered because COVID pandemic shut down so many ports around the world. So many manufacturing enterprises around the world were closed. And then you realize the extent of your dependency. So it becomes very important to be a voice, an intellectual thought leader, if you will, for the wider global community, for people to sit up and take notice of the vulnerability of small islands like Barbados, the extent of our exposure to economic ruination and destruction through no fault of our own. All of us in the Caribbean are in the same place. All of the islands of the Pacific are in the same place. Many of the larger countries, but are less developed economically, for example, those in Africa and some in Latin America as well, are in identically the same place, depending heavily on inputs to their industries being sourced from overseas and being unable to secure those inputs because of disruption in global supply or the rise of cost, which makes it very difficult for us to meet the demand. And then we have the knock-on effect of passing that on to our consuming public, which is already beleaguered. I think that the major expectation is of building awareness globally and hopefully to put some policy solutions in place. And I'll give you a few examples. We in the Caribbean have already begun, and we want to begin to share this concept with the wider global community. We've begun to look at the way in which we can restructure our supply chains because there have been disruptions even beyond COVID. You will recognize, for example, that with the war in the Ukraine, the cost of energy, of vital input, petroleum products, gas, diesel, etc., that has gone up. It makes it very difficult, therefore, for industry here to operate because we are dependent still very heavily on importing our fossil fuels into the island, which drive our industrial output. So we have to find ways of sourcing that energy commodity at a cheaper price. One of the reasons why we build a relationship with Venezuela right next door and argue with the Americans that an embargo on economic activity and trade with a nation like Venezuela, while they may feel that it is useful to apply political pressure to that administration, it has the unintended knock-on effect of making life harder for all of us in this region. Again, with regard to food supplies, we have to recognize that if there was bad weather in Florida, which is where we get a large amount of our food import from, or if a hurricane, heaven forbid, hit both sides of Florida at one time and knocked out the ports, then the Caribbean would be very exposed. We have to build a supply chain so that we build resilience. And therefore, the supply chain with countries like Suriname and Guyana, especially with respect to food, is very important for us as a backstop to that which we traditionally rely on with regard to the United States of America. So that type of changing of the traditional dependency, if you will, is a vital part of it. And those are the discussions which we have to have, because it just doesn't happen overnight. Part of this must now mean that we have to have the maritime or the marine ability to move goods from country to country within this region, which is one of the reasons why you would have seen in the press very recently that Barbados and Trinidad and Guyana are working on a regional ferry service. Yes, we would like to move people for pleasure purposes as well, but the critical thing must be that we access food security in this region by making Guyana far more accessible, more easily accessible. And similarly with Trinidad and Tobago, which has now spent $5 million to further develop their rice production capacity, so that this country that does not produce rice will be able to offer it to our nation, because we as a people are large consumers of that product, but we have to import it. So that is just an example of how the discussion is going to have to take place on a number of things. The marine transportation is about one. The digital economy is another one, because increasingly our business people must rely more on digital technology to move their services as well as their goods. And that means, simply put, trading online, offering your services online if you are in the services sector. We also have to make sure that our ports are a lot more technologically advanced and consumer friendly. And therefore, there has to be the building out of portals in all of the ports, so that you are then able to make sure that all of those things you have to do to meet quality control, for example, all the regulations that must be met if you're importing or exporting, can be done digitally. A one-stop shop type of thing, a single window, electronic trading window is what you would call it. And that therefore removes the need for all of our producers to take time to run about to 11 or 12 different spaces in the country in order to meet regulations. Logistics is another one. The way in which we plan out the connectivity between the different countries that we trade with, and make sure that that milk run that allows for a ship to stop at point A, B, and C is done most efficiently in the interest of avoiding the knock-on effect to our consumers. And again, where is that knock-on effect located? There are times when a ship bringing cargo into Barbados has to sit outside of our port for 4, 5, or 6 days, racking up costs while it does nothing. The consumer ultimately pays for that. That is largely because of inefficiency, either in the port itself or because there is such a competition for a very small port. So you have cruise ships in there which may be unable to move because they are functioning on a certain itinerary. There must be space and ability to get the cargo off of ships to the supermarkets, to the people. Without doing that in an efficient and effective way, the cost becomes exceptionally high, and everybody turns to the respective governments and says, cost of living, what are you doing about it? So in a real sense, these are the bread and butter issues that we are inviting the world to work with us on, because we're very sensitive to the way in which people feel the pain in their pocket, and we are also very mindful of the fact that this is not an overnight solution. Many of these things have hidden costs which are built in, and which we as governments must find a way to iron out and to exorcise from the process. Well, I'm happy to say that the global supply chain will be held here. The first global supply chain conference will be held here in Barbados, May 21st to 24th. It is a forum which will bring experts in a number of areas relating to the movement of goods and services, the building out of efficiency in small economies, building our productive capacity across small states, ensuring improved connectivity, better and more reliable maritime transport, lower cost of insurance, freight prices, etc. All of these are things that we will be discussing in Barbados in the interest of the wider Caribbean public's ability to enjoy a quality of life and maintain the quality of life to which we've become accustomed.